r/AskReddit by Reddify. What's the worst city you've ever visited? And why? East Street, Louis. Two close friends ended up getting lost there separately on different occasions and a cop pulled them over asking why they were there. After explaining the situation of getting lost, he immediately told them how to get out, and whatever you do, don't stop at the stop signs. I think it got worst city in America for a long time. My friends and I drove 24 hours non-stop to Aspen. I pulled the driving shift that went through East Street, Louis. We had to stop for gas. Had to stop. I had no idea. It was the middle of the night and everyone was asleep. Guy at the gas station yelled at me from behind the bulletproof glass to GTFO of Dodge as quickly as possible. Do not stop. Do not ask questions. Do not make a mistake. Get to the interstate. One time driving out east we had to stop in Gary. I had an extremely similar experience to this. Dayton, Ohio. It's like the armpit of hell. A place where God's loving grace refuses to reach. It's dirty. Segregated to an almost obscene degree. And everyone had an attitude of defeat in life. Like they all had low-grade depression. The whole town would benefit if someone dumped Paxil in the drinking water. The town is amazing in terms of boredom. The 5 things you can do in Dayton on a Friday night are eat, drink, wander around trying to find fun, wank, and cry. The city is large enough to have crime, poverty, gridlock, and racial tension, but small enough to be boring at the same time. I lived in Dayton for 2 years and I refuse to go back to that hithole. Dayton has been a dump for decades. I'd rather hang out in Detroit than Dayton, and I work in a Dayton suburb. Having said that, there are a few decent places to hang out. But it's mostly because you can't see outside while you're getting loaded. Detroit is great, especially recently. It seems that people who hit on it are those who haven't spent any significant time there. Budapest. My first clue should have been the supposed 4-star hotel we booked, which was basically a hovel. It was so dodgy. Went to see the sights and sat in the sectiony baths, which were great. And that was about it. My most memorable moment while I was in Budapest was when I standing outside a market and a group of men wouldn't leave me alone. One of them got to third base when he threw his hand up under my skirt. Getting fingered in a market by a random dude was definitely not on my bucket list. Yeah. I think you win the comments here. Getting surprise aped is worse than most experiences in foreign cities. Is there non-surprise ape? Scans through comments looking for my city. Ottawa, Canada here. Nothing so far. Though. If I may add it. This place is boring AF. Go to Montreal or Toronto. I really like visiting Ottawa. Coming from the prairies. There was lots to see there and I appreciated all the beautiful architecture. Montreal will always have my heart though. Lagos, Nigeria. Awful traffic. Smog everywhere. And way too noisy for comfort. Makes sense. Nigeria is going to be the China of the world in a couple of decades. They're just getting started. Pretty sure China is going to be the China of the world. Nigeria might be the China of Africa though. Caracas. Got robbed at gunpoint in a fake taxi at the airport. Rather auspicious start to a 3-month South American adventure. The town has no vestiges of its colonial past. And is a moldering pile of 70s high-rises. Fake taxi. Oh hi Sasha, big fan. Nah man. It's gotta be in England for that. If I can speak in terms of expectations vs reality, then Paris. I really like Paris. But I didn't go there expecting it to be flawless and without fault. I think for anyone who has this picture perfect view of the place, then a train ride in from Charles de Gaulle through the northern suburbs will immediately make them realize it is a light like any other with typical city features. I'd already heard horror stories about Paris and wasn't much of a Francophile to start with, was still shocked at how bad it was. Literally had locals grab me out of nowhere and scream at me. My sister was pursued and repeatedly kicked in the shin by some lady. She went there on another trip and the locals were exceptionally rude again. That's not the typical city experience MO. Edit, though I should add that I'm a dwarf. Which might explain the treatment I got. People grabbing me. Doesn't excuse it. but my experience is probably not representative of a typical tourist. Went here to see Italy, my country, destroyed. Saw France and hated instead. Leave. Laughing in Italian. Edit. Why none asked about Milan? Why? It's so underrated. BTW. Answering here at all questions in the comments. We do not laugh in Italian. But just imagine someone who is giggling while eating. Since this is what you think we do every hour of the day. Venice and Rome. But seems less, since there is more walking space, are packed of tourists. It's hard to spend the right amount of time every monument deserves, and the experience is often worse for this reason. Just try to come in not ordinary holiday time. In these days the mayor of Venice is thinking to limit the daily number of tourists. You have to check to enter the city. Florence, for art, is a must. Rome is a must but chaotic. Venice is pretty but very chaotic. Milan pretty and underrated because too modern. Naples is beautiful, but has two sides. In Italy, often people from the north despise people from the south, because their different history and personality is almost a different country, with their good and bad qualities. For Naples, we have few proverbs for this city. Like you see Naples, and then you die, but also when you go to Naples, you will cry 2 times when you arrive, and when you leave. We in the north changed it in when you arrive, and when they stole your wallet. We, in the north, also say Naples is a beautiful city. It's a pity that there are Neapolitans too. Jokes aside, it's a very beautiful city, with a lot of breathtaking views and monuments, but is plagued with criminality, inefficiency and bad management of the structures. If you're a methodic, organized, rigid person, don't go there. You will be driven crazy. Visit our countrysides. They are the best in the world. Small ancient cities lost in miles of farmlands. In Tuscany, ruins of Greek and Roman theaters on the edge of the sea. Sicily, wonderful chalets cornered by the tallest mountains of Europe. Piedmont and Trentino. Cities are the 20% of Italian beauty. I hope to answer to all questions. Ask more if you want. Happy to talk about our country, not our political laws. Those are ducked up. Someone did say Naples sucked really hard. To be fair, Naples does suck really hard. Mosey a lie. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Can confirm. Saw a guy get his ducking arm cut off at a supposedly 4-star cantina. Their live entertainment is hit as well. Camden, NJ. Everyone here wants to talk about hitholes like Gary, Indiana and Detroit. But those places don't have hit on the murder capital of the US. The cops they actually recommend you run red lights when it's dark. I got kicked out of Camden on my way back from a night in Philly trying to visit the Walt Whitman house. Some guy pulled over and asked my girlfriend and I where we were from. We told him both of us are NG natives, and he told us that we should know better. He asked us to please get in our car and leave, because nothing good was going to come out of us being around, and that the longer we stay the worse it was going to get. He just didn't want to see us get into any hit, I guess. He literally stood there and watched us get into the car before he got in his and drove away. It's worth mentioning that the Walt Whitman house is directly across the street from the Camden County Jail, formerly Riverfront State Prison. He was the DA over there or something. A friend of mine was driving home from AC and got lost in Camden. He saw a sign for Upgers and stupidly thought it was the one in New Brunswick. A cop saw some nerdy white kid in a Volvo driving around and flew up next to him. The cop rolled down his window and yelled at my friend to follow him and not to stop. The cop threw on his lights and escorted my friend back to the highway. Long story short, stay the duck out of Camden. Bruges. If I grew up on a farm and was retarded, Bruges might impress me, but I didn't. So it doesn't. What the facts in Bruges? There are a lot of alcoves in the Koninginnestraat Park. Check them out. Are you sure that's the right word? Alcoves? Killeen. TX military towns are the worst, and Killeen is right outside Fort Hood, the largest military installation in the world. Can confirm this as well. Live near Salado. The Wacko News spends its first 5 minutes every night telling us all the crime that happened in Killeen. Camden, NJ. It once was a fairly nice city with a lot of good jobs. Now, just off the top of my head, Camden at one point was the car stealing capital of the world, murder capital of the US, and was constantly ranked #1 most dangerous city in America. I also read a statistic stating that the drug trade in Camden is something along the lines of 4x the GDP of the city. Going there, it's a nightmare. A literal nightmare. Half the city looks like it's been bombed. All different kinds of people flock to Camden from the bustling suburbs that surround the city for heroin. One of the main train stops into the city is nicknamed Zombie Land. If you're lost in Camden, as it's the last exit before the bridge to Philadelphia, a cop might pull you over right away. They'll take one look at you, see that you aren't a junkie looking to score, and tell you to get the duck out. I've even heard of stories of cops telling citizens to not stop at red lights and stop signs. Let me repeat that. Cops tell people to break the law to GTFO of CAMDEN as fast as possible. One time, when I first got my license, I was driving around aimlessly at around 3 AM. I'm cruising along, and my heart sank when I notice that I've arrived to the last exit before the bridge to Philadelphia. And with my license I wasn't allowed to drive out of state. So I had to turn into Camden. This event has been, by a large margin, the highest adrenaline rush I've ever had. While trying desperately to make it out of the city, I saw two separate people breaking into two cars. One crackhead had busted out a window and was sifting through the car. The other was someone using some kind of tool to try and pop open a lock. These break-ins were on concurrent streets. But the craziest thing I saw that night was a dude walking around like a robot, wearing ducking night vision goggles. I swear to God, this guy was wearing night vision goggles at 3 AM, walking around like the ducking Terminator or some hit. But the craziest thing I saw that night was a dude walking around like a robot, wearing ducking night vision goggles. I swear to God, this guy was wearing night vision goggles at 3 AM, walking around like the ducking Terminator or some hit. Omicron. Cairo, Egypt. It was like I was in hell. It was so hot. Crossing the road was like a real life game of Frogger because no one was slowing down for anything. At the markets people would try to pull you into random alleys, and if that wasn't happening every second man was asking you to marry him. I've been to Cairo and I agree 100%. The Al-Khalili market was cool. But yeah, the shopkeepers were totally grabbing my arm. I finally had to yell to get them to let go. You can't walk 3 feet on the sidewalk without a swarm of cabbers honking at you like maniacs wanting to take you somewhere. So annoying. My guidebook said just say La Shukran, and they'll leave you alone. It surprisingly worked. Getting out of the airport, a man took my dad's luggage and told him he was customs. Even though we had just gone through customs, he led us to an office, and on the way there, a mob of customs agents relieved me of my luggage. In the office, he tried to sell us tour packages. I kept asking him about our luggage. He said not to worry, and to buy a tour package from him. We said no to the tours, and I told him I was gonna go find security. Finally he said he'd take us to our hotel. My dad agreed. My dad's from a poor country and assured me it was fine. That's how it's done in these parts. My Californianers was terrified the entire ride from the airport to the hotel. There were 3 men in the van. They could have done anything to us. I will admit that we did meet many friendly and helpful locals. Saw lots of interesting sights, and had a good time. But I'm a dude, so I didn't get any marriage proposals. La Shukran. For anyone too lazy to look it up, it means no thank you. Atlantic City, New Jersey. Good ducking God. Edit. Everyone below has accurate Atlantic City stories. But to elaborate, I was there to film an event that was happening at a resort type place a little ways inland. And given the proximity to Atlantic City, we figured we might as well get some shots of the vehicles. It was an automotive event, so we were getting ambience coverage of the cars. Having never been there before, we were of course surprised to find the entire place either dead or ridiculously sketchy. There wasn't a beachfront parking lot where we could shoot the cars, and there was barely a place we felt comfortable turning around. Not to mention the fact that the casinos are decrepit and some of the most depressing pseudo-Vegas buildings I've ever encountered. There's dismal. And then there's Atlantic City. My grandma used to take me and my cousin to whack when we were about 10 years old. She'd gamble and we'd hang out in the arcades on the boardwalk. That's how we witnessed a homeless man loop a chain around a newspaper box, rip it up from the boardwalk, and drag it into the ocean. Edit for clarity, he dragged it into the surf and left it there and walked away while talking to himself. He didn't try to kill himself. He just had some vendetta against the box. This is one of the most random things I've read on here. Thanks for the laugh. I can totally picture this in my mind. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.